We are in studio with the delegate from the 97th House of Delegates District S. Christian Anders. It goes by Chris. A lot of people think that name is Christopher. It is not. It is Christian.
That is correct, sir. That is correct, Rob.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Wonderful. How are you guys this morning?
Awesome,
good.
awesome, man.
Good.
Did you enjoy your time in Charleston last week?
Well, I learned two things. Number one, it was a great idea to put new tires on my truck this fall.
Oh, yeah.
Because we drove down on Sunday, and of course we drove into the snowstorm.
Yes.
And for the last 56 miles, I might have averaged 25 miles an hour or so. And then the second thing I learned, which made my wife very happy, is when you're sitting in the back of the chamber, I couldn't really hear what was going on up front. So, yes, I'm going in for hearing tests now.
Oh, my goodness.
Because to do my job effectively, I have to hear what's going on, obviously. So that's today.
All right. Well, good luck to you.
Well, thank you.
And remember, when you're shooting the gun, earphones.
Yeah, well, I think when I was younger, nobody used ear protection.
Right.
We just shot. And till my 20s, I was might have shot a fair amount. Plus, with my historical hobbies, there was a lot of cannons, things like that, and still is. So
Yeah, because you're a reenactor, aren't you?
that is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. And this year's the 250th anniversary of the beginning of the American Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a really big happening that people need to pay attention and take some time to sit back and realize why these patriots, what they were fighting for, and then compare to where we're at today.
Got a little loose there.
They
for
were
a while.
fighting so we could have a lot of taxes and government overregulation. yes, that was it, right, Chris?
Yeah, no.
Mission accomplished. Then. Go home. Yeah, Chris, I think I've known you for, 13, 14 years?
Something like
I think
that.
Since I started doing this show, you were, in the early years, you had a couple different job descriptions and titles and about 3 business cards worth of titles at one point. But all of it really centers around the same thing, which is individual liberty and the proper interpretation of the Constitution in terms of what this country was set up on and what it has gotten away from. Those have been some of your concerns. But your job now is as a state delegate, and clearly states operate within the constraints and the confines of the Constitution, but fighting a federal constitutional battle as a state delegate has its challenges in and of itself, does it not?
It does, but at the same time, if you've read the 1798 Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, which were written by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, who might have had something to do with the federal Constitution, they stated it was not only the ability but the duty of a state representative to stand between the people they represent and any federal tyranny. So that is basically your marching orders. You can stand up and say, no, that shall not happen here.
But within the framework of the House of Delegates, as the work funnels down from the Speaker to the newly elected people who were just put in place, you get more done, I guess, the more experience that you have. And you get more assignments the more experience that you have. And you get more assignments, too, by playing nicely with others, they say. Are you able to play nicely with others?
Well, I'm absolutely. I mean, the thing is, yes, I will never, I do what Jefferson says. In matters of style, go with the flow, but in matters of principle, stand like a rock. So in other words, I am not going to be one of the people to scream and yell on the floor, but I will never back down or compromise on principle. That's just the way it is. And I've had many good conversations with the Speaker. Pat McGeehan is now the majority leader. I've had a lot of good conversations with Pat, who I've known for a dozen years.
Good. He's on the show tomorrow, in fact.
Is he? Excellent, excellent. And so we're beginning to see kind of a changing of the guard in West Virginia. Now that we have a new governor that was actually elected as a Republican initially, right? We have a big change in the state Senate. And the voters overwhelmingly gave us a mandate to move forward, because if you look at West Virginia, we have the largest supermajority of quote-unquote Republicans in the nation. We should be the freest and most prosperous state in the union because of that, if we do what we say we were going to do on the campaign trail. And so that's the important thing. And that's one of the jobs of the voters. Voters think they can show up every 2 years, vote, and go away, right? It's part of the job to also hold politicians accountable and hold me accountable for what I promised to do during the campaign.
What are you promising to do? And other than broad strokes, as a delegate, I know you mentioned you got some bills you're already talking about right now, but what are you hoping to do? What are you promising to do?
Well, I've introduced, I think the number's 31 bills now, okay? And all of them are centered around individual liberty, which includes both your ability to live your life as you wish, and unless it interferes with someone else's life to do the same thing. But part of individual liberty is also economic freedom. Because if you do not have the money to live your life as you wish, you can't. So a lot of like getting rid of the rain tax in Berkeley County. I submitted legislation to prevent counties, cities, and municipalities from charging a stormwater runoff fee that is, well, essentially a tax on the rain that falls on your property.
How do you fight the federal government on that?
Well, the federal government has never actually sued anyone, and I have a feeling with President Trump now in office, that won't be a problem.
Fair point.
So, to speeding up the elimination of the income tax. Speed that up, because I knocked on over 6,000 doors. I talked to the voters. When they can't afford to put food on their table, we have a real problem. Okay, this is America where everybody should have the ability to achieve their dreams. And government a lot of times is standing in the way, whether it's through regulations or taxes. It's just like Berkeley County wants an additional 1% sales tax, and I will fight that with every part of my being to stop that from happening. We need to get the people their money back. People often would ask me when I knocked on doors, what are you going to give us? I said, well, I'm not Santa Claus. I'm not going to show up with a bunch of presents, okay? It's my duty to get your freedom and your money back so that you can achieve your goals. And most recently, it's something we talked about before, and then I put a couple articles out. I think they ran in about 15 papers in the state.
Yes.
Is to protect your right to privacy.
And what does that mean in regards to the letter to the editor you submitted last week?
Okay. There's a company called Rank One Computing. And they have, through federal grants they received with the help of Manchin and Capito, instituted a smart cities initiative in Marion County, West Virginia, and they're trying to spread all over the state. And what this does is this connects cameras on the street with cameras in stores and license plate readers and everything else, and they start tracking people. They scan your face, instantly do a background check, and then they have a 28-hour rolling. They basically follow you for 28 hours, and as time moves forward, it keeps. So they can track everything you do.
You're going to be really bored watching me throughout the day.
Yeah, exactly. There's that. But we have a Fourth Amendment right, both on the U.S. Constitution and the right to privacy under the West Virginia State Constitution, that without due process of law, without getting a warrant and probable cause, you have the right to your privacy. And this is expanding everywhere. They're putting gun detection software in this stuff. So if you have a bulge underneath, it's the same that they use a lot of times in airports. If you have a bulge underneath your shirt or your jacket, they're going to immediately identify this guy's got a gun. Well, in West Virginia, we all pretty much have guns, and we have constitutional carry. And why are they creating a database? Now that they've scanned your face, they've got a database of this person owns a firearm and carries it. That's the type of stuff. This is not 1984. This is not some Orwellian future. This is not the Minority Report. We have a right to privacy. A lot of people, I'm a big Second Amendment supporter, but every single amendment is just as important, and your right to privacy is something I will always fight for. So I introduced legislation, number one, to make it a felony to track anyone by their face and facial recognition without a warrant. Secondly, and this is a very powerful piece, to allow the people to sue any government that does this for violating their civil rights. This has no place in a free society, and this must be stopped. And it's interesting when you start tracing where this money comes from. They go into mostly, they've started, how can I say, well, essentially poor states, and go in and donate a lot of money to the colleges. Hey, team with us to develop the software, right? And so they try to buy their way in. And Senator Chris Rose and I he's introducing it in the Senate. Tom Willis has already co-sponsored that legislation. I have multiple co-sponsors in the House on this, because you're right, the privacy is one of the reasons that we fought the American Revolution. This is the 250th anniversary year of the beginning of the American Revolution, and the British General Warrant, which enabled the British just to search you without a warrant at any time. They could just go and root through your stuff. is one of the major causes of the revolution. So I'm definitely fighting for this. This is something I will fight to the floor, everything I can do, because the government has no right to track you or invade your privacy without due process of law, which means probable cause.
How does law enforcement feel about your bill? Have you contacted any?
No, I haven't been contacted. Some of them have contacted Senator Rose. We've requested to go to a fusion center. And what people don't know what a fusion center is, that's where all the data is stored. And they take all the data from the license plates readers and the security cameras and everything else, and they have this huge database. So far, they haven't agreed to let us come see it. I would very much love to see what they're actually doing, because all we're hearing is news reports of what they could be doing, and of course, ROC, Rank 1 Computing, bragging about the fact that they're putting the Smart Cities Initiative in. And I'm sorry, it's all over the country, and humans are imperfect. Technology is even more imperfect. There's been many cases, even in Texas, a gentleman was arrested because he had been scanned, and they thought he was a shoplifter, so they arrested him, put him in jail, and before they figured out they had the wrong guy, he was gang raped by 3 inmates.
Yikes.
There's a lot of cases when these automatic license plate reader cameras get it wrong too. I was just reading this morning a case where, because they use it a lot in the UK, a 16-year-old girl was killed because the wrong car was identified. The police officer spun around and was speeding through a neighborhood to get them, and ran over and killed this young lady.
Geez.
So technology is very imperfect. I mean, think about it. When we had the no-fly list, right, and we found out that congressmen were on the no-fly list, how did this happen, right? Data is very imperfect, so we just have to stop this.
Mr. Miller.
I'm just amazed listening to some of this, that it's in West Virginia. I would have never imagined that would be going on. So clearly, are you feeling like there is a lot of support behind these measures, as you mentioned, those on the Senate side and the House side, to do away with this?
Absolutely. I've been speaking more with Senator Rose as he's talking with the different state senators, and there's a lot of support through leadership to get this done. Right, to make this happen. And West Virginia would be the first state to actually ban it. Wyoming did tweak it a little bit, and Maine did tweak it a little bit. But I'm sorry, when it comes to a constitutional right, when you take the oath of office, what do you swear an oath to? Defending the Constitution.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Bondwell.
Well, I had heard just a very little bit about that. That's scary. I mean, it's scary. It's wrong. I mean, that's our basic freedom. I mean, they can track us, and what you said, I mean, technology, I mean, information can be wrong. I mean, you hear all the time about people getting arrested, and just because they have the wrong information, or they've got the wrong Joe Smith. Is there any sort of federal legislation that would supersede the state legislation that you guys are pushing?
Well, I wish there would be some sort of federal legislation that would ban this. Right?
No, but I'm saying, is there any federal legislation? Is there federal legislation that would allow them still to do it, even if our state law doesn't allow it?
Not that I've identified, but
Okay.
even if they did, remember the Constitution is a compact between the states, giving the federal government specific powers and also banning them from doing specific things. Right. So even if it did, that's unconstitutional anyhow. So it goes back to what I talked about at the beginning with what the 1798 Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, when the author of the Constitution says it's your job to defend the Constitution. When the federal government oversteps at the state level, then you do it.
If we had about 40 hours here, we could list all of the federal oversteps, and we'd still probably need another month or two. I mean, I'm a strict constructionist. I mean, I believe in the Constitution, and I believe that powers not expressly granted to the federal government should be left to the states, and that's gone by the wayside. I mean, unbelievably.
But they really stuck a stake in the heart of that in 1913 when they passed the first the Federal Reserve Act, then they turned around and passed the 16th Amendment, which was the income tax. So what the federal government can do is tax the citizens of the state and then bribe the state to accept their mandates with their own citizens' money. Right? And then, of course, the 17th Amendment, which gutted the Republic because you have the direct election of senators, and that's not how it was supposed to work. It was supposed to be the House of Representatives were elected by the people, that's the people's house, and the Senate was the state house, where the state legislatures appointed, of course, and that was all changed as well. That's why, and the big money men, the bankers and everybody else wanted that because they knew they could manipulate statewide elections, get in there and throw a lot of money at it compared to manipulating, a vote in the House of Delegates or a vote in the state Senate.
Well, many things have been changed in the Constitution over the years. Some of them needed changed.
Okay.
It wasn't a perfect document, obviously.
No, it wasn't. But you don't just sidestep around it and create new laws. If you want something different, you do what they've always historically done. You amend the Constitution.
That's what you
right?
do.
You don't ignore it. You don't say, well, this applies, but not here.
Not today.
Yeah. So you have to, there's a proper method by which to amend it. And those seeking power prefer mostly down in the Beltway, which I lovingly always refer to as Mordor. What they do is they just sidestep it, pass some bills. Oh, I support the Second Amendment, but I support the Fourth Amendment, but I support the 10th Amendment. But there is no but. The Constitution is what it is unless you amend it.
Let's talk about money in politics, Christopher, because I think that money is the ruination of politics. And you mentioned the example of being able to buy senators since they're no longer appointed. Not that was a flawless process either. Should there be a limit on the amount of money that can flow into a campaign from PACs?
I don't believe so.
Why not?
Because the Citizens United did state that, money is free speech, right? That people can do it. Now, is it, like in my election, would it have been wonderful to keep the large PACs from spending $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 against me in the primary and the general? That would have been wonderful. But my job was to go out and fundraise, from my supporters to be able to combat that. I think in the end, my election, there was approximately 170 couple thousand spent against me between the PACs and my opponents, and I spent $46,000. So it can be done.
Should there be accountability on the claims made during some of these ads?
There absolutely should be. And there's a lot of claims being made. Now, I do not favor censorship like the Facebook censorship stuff.
How about truthful, though? Truthful censorship.
I mean, people make up a lot of stuff. Like, for instance, there were flyers going against me during the general election saying that I was going to end Social Security. Now, the last I checked, a state delegate can't end Social Security. They found a statement I had made where I had called Social Security a scheme that they keep robbing money out of to fund their other stuff.
Right.
And the best thing they can do is give people their money back right now. One lump sum. It's the people's money they've paid in. It's their money. They should get it back. And of course, what did they turn that into?
You want to end Social Security?
Exactly. As a state rep.
Every state rep has that ability.
Right. I mean, we do that on every Tuesday.
Social Security survives by taking money from younger people who are working and giving it to older people who have worked already, and then they show you an account that this is how much money you've got coming to you, and then every so often the CBO gives us a new idea of when Social Security will go bankrupt, and then they say we have this surplus, which the surplus is actually a bunch of IOUs that don't exist in actual money. It's just something that's on an accounting ledger that says here's how much extra money we'd have if we hadn't spent it all in other places.
Right, because they took it all, which they weren't allowed to do, but they did anyway, and
they do there's so much law breaking going on in the political class. I often say that the only real criminals we have in America right now are mostly the elected ones. So
and you just joined that club.
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
but I mean,
He's
it's just like our budget. It's just like
infiltrating.
It's what's happening with our state budget. We have a state budget. And I learned a little bit about this, and I'm learning a lot more. I'm delving in through that thing. We get the budget. You'll get a big book, so I plan on a lot of caffeine and reading through it. But what they do is once the budget number is met, they have what's called the back of the budget, the wish list that people put in. That once we've got the even budget, any money's left over, then they have bike trails and this that. That's the people's money. We should, once we hit funding of our budget, the money should go back to the people who paid it, because it's not the government's money, it's the people's money. They paid it in. Okay, when you're talking to people who are barely getting by, and then you see a governor going around and spending, $34 million on a bike trail. If that doesn't infuriate you, I don't know what does.
We've got a minute left here, Chris. When do you guys go back for the actual legislative session?
We go back. I go down the 7th. We have caucus on the 9th, 10th, and 11th, and we're back in session on the 12th.
Do you know what committees you have?
No, I do not. They've been very busy. There's been some odd things happen with the election and a few other things that have occurred they've been dealing with.
We've heard.
Yeah.
We heard tell.
Yeah, there's some odd things going on, like in the 91st district. So, of which it's a criminal case. I'm not talking about it at all. I learned that one. But
What committees would you like?
well, obviously, I like judiciary or gov, org, or health because medical freedom, eliminating the mandates, reducing size and scope of government, getting people their freedom back.
Good to see you again, sir.
All right, thank you.
From the 97th, newly elected Delegate S. Christian Anders here.